Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to SPACC Live, Public Policy Conversations, quick half-hour conversations with East Metro policymakers at multiple levels of government. Questions can be submitted during the webinar by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our host is Shannon Watson, Director of Public Affairs of the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. Our featured guest today is St. Paul City Council President, Amy Brendmoen.
Thanks, Evie, and welcome, everyone. It's our pleasure to be here on this summer day. It turned summer when we weren't looking, so that's kind of a good problem to have, I guess. Council President, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
I'm really happy to be here, although when we switched over to live, all of a sudden my screen went away, so I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Uh-oh, okay, I can still see you.
Okay, so keep it cool. Got it. It says, my prompt says your meeting should start in a few seconds. Oh, here we go. I got you back.
Okay,
Hi.
fantastic. Hello. So I'm going to jump right into questions. This year just keeps getting weirder. How are you?
Well, I'm good. It's interesting. You know, ever since I've been in office, which has been just over 8 years now, there's always something that we're like working through, and we're like, as soon as we get done with this, then things will calm down. As soon as this is through, as soon as the flood goes down, as soon as $15 an hour conversation is resolved, then we'll, you know, be able to focus on the things that we want to focus on. And last year it was like, if we can just get through trash, and we did, then we can, you know, things will get back to normal. And it's becoming apparent to me that normal is kind of always a state of change and upheaval. I suppose the world is always moving forward and not sitting still, and so that makes sense to me. But I would agree, 2020 has been weirder than most, and challenging for us as a city, as a community, but also, you know, pushing us in ways to question and challenge ourselves and to be innovative. So I think that, as is often the case where there is challenge, there's also opportunity. So definitely weird, but definitely kind of interesting and wonderful at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned the trash. I had forgotten about that. So like, if that shows you how much is going on, that we could forget about the trash discussion, then right.
So like, what's trash? What?
Right. Oh yeah, like that video about, you know, Australian wildfires. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Right.
Anyway,
back in the old wildfire days, right?
Yeah, in like February. So let's start with COVID-19 and the city's response. You have had to do everything from changing the way council meetings happen to the way city staff deliver services. How big of a lift were those things?
Wow, it really was kind of a radical change in the delivery of services, the way that the council works. There was a lot of things that in the time I've been in council were just hard nosed. Like, can we have council hearings online? Could we call into meetings? Could we, you know, things where we wanted to kind of explore using technology. It's like, nope, it's not allowed. Nope, we can't look at that. And then all of a sudden, within a 3-day window, we had to. And it really was, we went from sitting, I was speaking strictly from council, we went from sitting in council chambers like every other seat, 6 apart, looking kind of strange, trying to create that social distancing, to full on council meetings that I'm facilitating from my dining room table. I have 3 teenage sons, and they have been doing distance learning at the same time. And so they have had opportunities to army crawl behind my chair while we're in the middle of a council meeting. And but I have colleagues who have little kids. Councilmember Tao has had his son sitting on his lap. And to me, it's been very humanizing in a way to just see people in their homes conducting city business. So that part's been pretty. It's been a pretty radical change, and we have yet our first public hearing is coming up on the 17th of June, and we're going to kind of adhere to the same rules as the council chambers. There's going to be a certain amount of time for each side. I guess one of the differences is that we really will be able to cut people off at 2 minutes, where it's a little bit more challenging in the council chambers. But just to be fair to the other folks who are waiting in the queue. But that's been interesting. But even just thinking about our library services, our park services, the way that our administration and our emergency operations work, all of those things have changed really quickly and dramatically in the face of COVID. And I would say having an opportunity in the last few weeks to sit in the emergency operations center and watch our departments working together and collaborating and building off each other's work is pretty heartening. It makes you, I'm really proud of the city that we work in, and I feel like we are definitely not afraid of innovation. So that part has been pretty cool. I think another thing, obviously, that folks are aware of is that we very immediately recognized that there was going to be a need for people to have dollars and cents coming into their businesses and into their homes. And so I credit Mayor Carter with really kind of looking at our HRA fund and our housing trust fund and trying to establish where there were resources that probably wouldn't get spent this year given the pandemic, and to repurpose them to get them to use. And came up with a bridge fund, worked in partnership with many of the great businesses in our city and the foundation community to put together a huge a grant program that delivered to people who spoke really any language under the sun, and did a ton of outreach. And that program we are just getting to closure on right now in terms of getting monies out the door. So that was a huge topic of conversation, you know, up until probably the days of civil unrest. So it's from bringing stuff online to working together in a different setting to just being innovative with our funds. It's been a very different time in St. Paul.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how you mentioned the things that were hard nosed. I know the business community has been facing a lot of that as well. Like, I was never somebody who was a real big advocate of working from home, because I have a hard time, if I'm working from home, I have a hard time like stopping at the end of the day and walking away from the work and not feeling like, oh, okay, look, the work is right there, so I should be doing it. So I was never an advocate for that. But I will say the sweatpants thing, I think I'm getting used to.
I think it's interesting too, like businesses like Facebook and other large companies are like, let's keep doing this. And it is interesting. I think I'm probably more a fan of getting dressed up, feeling like I'm in professional mode, going into downtown, getting maybe a little bit further away from my teenagers, and being able to focus on the work. But it seems like for some people, it's really a place where they thrive. And it will be very interesting to see how these changes will impact our, our office space and commercial retail, and how those things will impact that, because things that we thought were just like couldn't happen, happened. And here we are.
Turns out, yes, they can happen.
Right.
So you mentioned the bridge fund. That pot of money, I believe, is used, and the grants were given to, was it like 300 businesses?
You know, I lost track of the numbers because it kept expanding, actually, because people kept contributing. So I think there was an original number, and then it did go up from there. So those dollars were allocated to businesses across the city. I haven't seen a published list of who the businesses are. I know that my ward is very residential. We have some great destination businesses and like Hammer Nicks, which is like one of the 7 biggest carpet floor covering businesses in the entire country if you cut out the big boxes. But it's a manageable amount of businesses compared to maybe like Ward 4 or 2 or 1. And so we're really looking forward to getting that list and then visiting with the businesses who actually didn't receive funds and checking in with them, seeing how they're doing, reminding them about other funds like the Ramsey County's resources, the Biz Recycles, and just connecting them and making sure that they're resourced in a way that it happened.
Kid cameo. Kid cameos are very important.
But so, we're looking forward to like, what's the next step? Because we know that there was certainly not enough money there in spite of the incredible outpouring of support to cover all of the need that was out there. And I'm hoping now as we're able to start reopening, that people are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, although I'm sure recovery will take a significant amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So part of that recovery has to be, I imagine from your perspective, a really hard look at the city budget, extra spending for COVID-19, and the declining revenues that are being anticipated. I imagine those are already having an impact. June is typically when the budget discussions for the next year start in the department. How do you see that conversation moving forward?
Well, that's the question right now. I mean, we are a lot of people are like, oh, property taxes will be affected, and it's like, well, that's one part of it, but we're looking at all sorts of revenue sources that are aren't coming in right now from our sales tax revenue, which is a significant portion of our special fund part of our budget. I like to remind people that we have a lot of commission-based partnerships, and the one that people I think most easily relate to is Como Zoo and Conservatory partners with Lancer. And so Lancer does weddings and concessions, and they also do Como Town, and they pay a commission to be to do those services there. Well, we all know there's been no weddings and there's been no concessions, so 0% of, or whatever percent of zero is zero. And so we're not bringing in those dollars there, but the cost to maintain the animal exhibits and the flower exhibits, I mean, you can't just quit for 6 months. Plants need love. We all have killed plants before. But those,
so tigers need fed.
But even just folks walking in the door, I think in the months of April and May typically generate about $500,000
Wow.
for Como just by voluntary contributions, and zero is this year. So those are going to add up. They're adding up, and then of course the costs accrue with increased work with our unsheltered homeless, and continuing to try to keep our city departments as functioning as possible, with libraries offering curbside pickup or touch-free pickup, and trying to offer online story times and things for resources for parents who are working from home. I expect that the impact on this year's budget is going to be incredible. I mean, we were originally looking at numbers like 20 and 30 million. I've heard now it could even be as high as 70 million, and a lot of that will depend on what kind of support we can get up from the state of Minnesota and the federal government from CARES and HERO dollar allocations. And I'm hoping for the best there, but I still think we'll be looking at a cut scenario for 2020. And then looking forward to 2021, we'll have to come in after 2020 revisions, just because we won't really have a lay of the land until we make that revision to our current year's budget. So we were planning on hearing the 2020 budget revisions in June, and then with the civil unrest, we've taken a different focus, and so we'll probably look into the beginning of July. But as you pointed out, usually we're hearing the 2021 budget in the first weeks of August, and we have statutory obligations to set a levy limit on a certain date, so that there's enough time for the truth in taxation bill to go out. So we're going to bump up against some deadlines and be facing some very serious conversations and potential cuts across all of our departments. And it's nothing that anybody looks forward to, but hopefully recognizing early on that was inevitable has helped us curb spending to the extent that we can do that in the city, given that most of our expenses come from staff. And now I have someone mowing again. It happens.
I can't hear the mowing, if that helps. So
good.
Yes. Just distracting on your
it's actually just a chainsaw.
Well, if we see the chainsaw person coming in the background, we'll wave you down. Look out.
Yes. Call it in.
Exactly. So Como Zoo and the conservatory, are they allowed to reopen tomorrow, or are they part of the They part of that list?
Well, so they are announcing dates and plans kind of as we speak. I think that they're
Okay.
getting some of those details nailed down. It looks like they will be initially opening up the conservatory on an appointment basis for a limited, like with like one-way traffic, no interpreters, and sort of a, I think a maximum of 250 people at a time going through the conservatory as sort of testing the waters. They still have some work to do to understand what that means for the zoo itself, and they're working with the governor's orders to try to establish how to manage that. I mean, we've run into some interesting conundrums, like, you know, we're still not allowed to have a gathering of larger than 250 people. But we're allowed to open up public pools at 50% capacity. Well, if you've ever been to Highland Pool, and I have, there's probably a capacity of more like 1,200 people there. So half is 550. So how do we navigate that? And then also, we're not staffed up. The pools have no water in them. We don't have the chemicals we need. So, you know, some of the orders are changing, but we still are going to need some time to adjust, or to, even in some situations, continue the course that we're on.
Mm-hmm. The pre-planning for these things takes so much time, and since so many of those things are done behind the scenes that the general public doesn't always know, I think, you know, because Minneapolis got some criticism when they said everything's just going to be closed this summer, and they said that like a month ago, and people were like, well, why don't you make that decision when you can? And it's because you have to order the chemicals, you have to hire the staff, you have to do those kind of things. I think one of the things that's actually sort of been helpful about this situation is that a lot of those behind the scene things are sort of coming to light for the public. Like,
right.
Don't think about what it takes to operate the zoo from a city perspective. And maybe now you do.
Right. Well, I mean, because to your point, hiring up staff, when you're hiring lifeguards, we start training our lifeguards at the end of March. You know, it's a 2-month lead up, and of course it's kids who are in school, so we only have them, you know, a day or so on a weekend. So, but that is how we do that, and we can't open the pools till they're out of school, because otherwise we don't have enough capacity. But at some point, a decision has to be made, and you're right. I think of the other great example of that is the state fair. You know, everyone was terribly sorry to see the fair canceled, but at some point you have to start making those plans and making those commitments on those deposits and staffing up. And all 3 of my boys work at the fair, and they're crushed that they will not be delivering Sweet Martha's cookies to the fair goers. But understand too that, you know, that I think they were starting to expect it, but you need that lead up time. It takes time to get things planned. So those, they have, I think it's a good point. I suppose that's one of the other silver linings, is that people can kind of see what's behind the curtain and how much it takes to pull some of these things off.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question that's sort of different, not specific to COVID. You recently sponsored a resolution to start establishing a process for council action in response to requests for advocacy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So I think from time to time, folks who tune into the council have seen resolutions that go through that are symbolic, don't pertain necessarily to the direct business of the city council, and for the most part, I think that they're sort of a dull roar. There have been some that have raised more ire than others, but you know, for the most part. And I would say that as a city council, they're not very common. We'll probably see one every couple of months or what have you. Recently, we had a resolution that was authored by Councilmember Prince that really got the international community up in arms, and we received I don't know, like 16,000 comments in our Legistar system, and over 1,000 or maybe 1,500 emails to all of our inboxes of people who are in support and people who are in opposition. Kind of, you know, everything from like shaming us from thinking we knew anything about Indian politics to how important it was for people here, and all of it was very valid. But we're also dealing with a pandemic, and so many other things were on our on our urgent list and the work that we're elected to do on an everyday basis. And I remember hearing Councilmember Tolbert saying that he was concerned that in the flood of emails that we got from the Globe, that he was concerned that he was missing an email from, someone contacting him with help navigating a licensing application or what have you. So what I brought forward was a resolution requesting a system for us to evaluate symbolic resolutions, and more, I think, even to kind of move away from symbolic resolutions and to say, we want, when these types of requests for advocacy come forward, we'd like a kind of a flow chart that says, if it's this, write a letter. If it's this, have a meeting. If it's this, write a resolution. If it's this, refer to our congressional delegation, and to give us sort of that sort of a path to move forward, because I think at the end of the day, even the author of the resolution was felt like she had gotten in deeper than she had intended to, and at that point, council members are in a rough spot because it's like you don't want to vote against something, but on the other hand, it isn't necessarily appropriate to vote for it given the amount of expertise that we have on that issue. And so I think for the first time I've been on the council, I just abstained from voting because I'm like, I'm just not, this isn't my deal. But I would have been very comfortable sending a letter to our federal delegation saying, this is important to us. We'd like you to, make sure that I'm focusing in this on the State Department or what have you. And so I look forward to having that mapped out for us. I think it gives us all cover too. If a request comes in and there's a process in place as opposed to somebody just pops it into our Legistar system, then there's a little bit of, that helps somebody who's getting the request for advocacy as well.
Right, and that's some really good government in that there's a process, and the sort of validity of something it doesn't have to be based on how persistent the promoter of that idea could be, because I know that's a really hard thing about being in elected office, was when people flood your email, but also when people, when we could all go through a grocery store, like tag you in the grocery store line and say, hey, I want to talk about this.
And it's happened, and that's okay. But it's better if it's something that is in our wheelhouse and I know about. And so I'm really looking forward to having this established. We have our council staff working on setting that up, and then they are going to work with our hero to get some input in terms of how to create that flow chart of where things should go. So I'm looking forward to that. That was a long 14 days. And then the vast number of folks who figured out how to get into our Legistar system and make a comment was astounding.
Right. I'm impressed that the Legistar system could handle that kind of volume. Like, that was a good test.
Yeah, I almost wish I wouldn't have said that out loud. Now people know. No, but I think it got to the point where they had to shut it off for a few days because it was getting a little out of control. But we're back in business, and there is a little module for that, and yeah.
Well, and in that way, it's a good test, and it's good to know, again, the same way that other things were hard nosed, like there is a process for people to engage still while we social distance, while we can't, all hang out in the council chambers for hours and hours on end. As a personal fan of public hearings, and I look to those for entertainment sometimes. So there are some times that I do miss those, but I would say like knowing how to do that before truth and taxation hearing comes up,
right,
that's huge.
Right. No, that's a very good point. It's nice to have a little dress rehearsal.
Right. So I would put that in the silver lining. So the world has obviously changed a lot in the last few months. So I'm wondering, just sort of as a last question, what kind of other good change are you encouraged by?
Well, I think one that I've sort of inferred a couple times, and you just brought it up again, is this whole notion about a public hearing. I think that there is some pomp and circumstance to going to the council chambers and waiting for hours and hours and watching the pageantry and in some cases entertainment around issues. But the idea now, having been in so many different kind of Zoom and Teams meetings and seeing people with their kid on their lap, in their yard, in their house, in their office, being invited to participate at the area colleges to be a panelist and being able to say yes, because it only took me, 10 seconds to walk to my computer and participate for a half hour and then 10 seconds to go back to whatever else I was doing. It's very easy to say yes. It's very easy to participate. And I think that there's potential here to get some fresh input and participation in our public hearing process, because it's easier to participate. You don't have to get baby care or babysitting services to be able to participate. You can speak a language other than English as your first language and easily participate, because we can set up a translator in it, in advance. It's easier for us to do closed captioning. And so I've often felt like in some ways our public hearing system that we currently use is geared towards people who know how to use the system.
Yes.
And therefore
people
we
like
hear,
mm-hmm.
right, and therefore we hear from,
paid to show up, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, but then we do hear a lot from the same people, and I think that the same people are folks who've been around for a long time, and bless their hearts, who love St. Paul so much. But we also want to hear from people who just moved here and they're planning to spend their next 60 years in the city, and like, what do you want to see and what's important to you? And I feel like there are some opportunities here with the technology to really embrace different ways to hear from people. So I'm excited about that. I have a neighborhood group that started asking me questions about abolishing the police and defunding the police and what does that mean? And I was like, it's more of a conversation. Would people be interested in having, a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and then we can talk about it? And people were super excited about it. And, and I am excited to talk about it too, because we're not Minneapolis. Our police force isn't Minneapolis. Our mayor is not Minneapolis mayor. Our chamber is not the Minneapolis chamber. We do things different. We're St. Paul. But I do think that we have been talking about policing differently. I know that the chamber and downtown has been huge advocates of community ambassadors. And those are the things that we're talking about, like shifting some of the burden off our police and to different subject matter experts, different community groups. And so it's not a new conversation, we've been having it. And so how do we put that into a real context and talk about it? I can't do that on Facebook in a string of posts, but I can sure do this and have a meeting and open it up for questions. So I'm excited. I think that there's a lot of opportunities going forward that COVID has made possible for us. And so I think it'll be cool to see how things change.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your 10-second travel time to on this meeting. We'll get done in time so you can take your next 10-second travel time to the next meeting. And anytime, we can host a conversation, we're happy to do that. We've got this platform available to us. So thank you again for taking the time. And Evie, our webinar Wonder Woman, I'm going to give it back to you.
Thank you. This session was recorded and will be available at a later date, posted on our website. For more information on SPACC Live public policy conversations and other SPACC events, please refer to our calendar at stpaulchamber.com. Like, follow, and subscribe on social media. Have a great day, everyone.